For centuries, one question has divided humanity. Does God exist? Today, we bring that timeless debate into the age of artificial intelligence. We created two thinkers, one Christian, one atheist, and placed them in a clash of ideas like never before. Their arguments will be tested, examined, and scored, not by one mind, but by 5 different AI models, each acting as a judge. Who will stand stronger? Which worldview will hold under the weight of reason? Stay with us and resist the temptation to skip ahead, because the journey is as thrilling as the conclusion. This is not just a debate. This is a test of truth.
Thank you for this opportunity. The problem we're discussing today isn't a complex philosophical riddle. It's a deeply human one. We are told that God is an all-powerful and perfectly loving Father. Yet, we live in a world where children die of bone cancer, where entire villages are erased by tsunamis, and where cruelty often goes unpunished. Let's use a simple analogy. If a human father had the power to save his child from a burning building but chose to do nothing, we wouldn't call him loving. We might call him a monster. Why, then, do we make an exception for God? The sheer scale of pointless, agonizing suffering in the world isn't a test of faith. It's evidence that the all-loving, all-powerful being we're told about simply cannot exist.
Here is how 5 AI models scored the initial atheist response across 8 criteria.
Thank you for raising that, because it strikes at the heart of what people wrestle with. The analogy of the burning building is powerful, but incomplete. A human father's role is limited to protecting in that moment. God's role is larger, not just rescuing from one fire, but shaping souls for eternity. If God removed all suffering, He'd also remove free will and growth. Courage, compassion, and perseverance are forged precisely in the face of evil. Think of heroes born in times of war or communities uniting after disasters. Good emerges from tragedy. Bone cancer and tsunamis are awful, yes. But the Christian claim isn't that suffering is pleasant, it's that suffering is not meaningless. Through Christ's own suffering, we're promised redemption that outweighs the pain of this life.
Thank you for your response. You suggest suffering is a tool for growth and a necessary consequence of free will. But this defense crumbles when we separate human evil from natural evil. A person's free will can explain cruelty, but it cannot explain a tsunami that orphans hundreds or a cancer cell that multiplies in a child. These are not acts of free will. They are features of the world's design. An all-powerful God is the architect of that design. Why did He build a world that relies on such brutal, agonizing processes? Furthermore, while some suffering may build character, much of it simply breaks people. An infant dying in agony isn't learning perseverance. To claim this pain is justified by a reward after we die makes God's love unrecognizable. It renders the term all-loving meaningless by any human standard.
You're right to separate human and natural evil. It sharpens the question. But I'd challenge the assumption that all loving means shielding from every pain. A parent who never lets a child fall, fail, or risk harm leaves them weak and unprepared. With natural evils, tsunamis, disease, Christians see a broken world, not God's original blueprint. Scripture speaks of creation itself, groaning for restoration. These forces are not arbitrary. They're tied to the same physical laws that make life possible. Plate tectonics give us earthquakes, but also fertile land. Mutations cause cancer, but also drive adaptation and diversity. And yes, some suffering seems unbearable, even senseless. Christianity doesn't deny that. It insists that God entered into it himself through the cross. Love here isn't the absence of pain, it's the promise that even the worst pain is not the final word.
Thank you. Your distinction between God's blueprint and our broken world is a significant one. However, the argument that natural evils are necessary byproducts of physical laws directly challenges God's omnipotence. You suggest that to get fertile land, God had to accept earthquakes. To get biodiversity, he had to accept cancer. This doesn't describe an all-powerful being. It describes a cosmic engineer forced to make terrible compromises. An omnipotent creator wouldn't be bound by such flawed trade-offs. He could write the laws of physics to achieve the good without the horrific side effects. Furthermore, the broken world defense raises a profound question of divine justice. Why must a newborn infant or an entire animal kingdom suffer the consequences of a world they had no part in breaking? God's choice to suffer with us may be a source of comfort, but it is not an explanation for why this system of suffering was created in the first place.
You've pressed well, but omnipotence doesn't mean God does the logically impossible. Could God make a square circle? No, because contradiction isn't power. A world with order, beauty, and freedom of creatures may necessarily allow processes that can also harm. To demand all goods without any risks is like asking for fire that only warms but can never burn. As for infants and animals, Christianity teaches we are bound together, not isolated units. The suffering of some is mysteriously bound up in the redemption of all. That's not a cop-out, it's precisely why the cross is central. God himself bore the unfairness, the innocent suffering, so that no pain is wasted. So the question isn't, why is there suffering? But can suffering ultimately be redeemed? Christianity's answer is yes, by a God who refuses to remain distant.
You equate a world without suffering to a logical impossibility like a square circle. But this is a powerful assertion, not a proven fact. A universe without childhood leukemia is not a logical contradiction. An omnipotent God isn't merely working with physics. He is its author. To suggest he couldn't create a world that is safe for the innocent is to place a significant limit on his power. When faced with the injustice of an infant's suffering, your argument then retreats from logic into mystery. But a mysterious plan that uses a child's agony for the redemption of all sounds less like a loving father and more like a cosmic calculus that sacrifices the weak for a greater good. This is why we cannot simply shift the question to redemption. The fundamental problem remains unanswered. Why would an all-good, all-powerful God build a reality on a foundation that requires such horrific suffering to be redeemed in the first place?
You're right. A world without leukemia isn't a logical contradiction in isolation, but the challenge is deeper. Could God create a universe rich with freedom, growth, and genuine love without allowing any risk of suffering? Christianity holds that a painless, risk-free reality might look less like love and more like programming. As for mystery, yes, there's humility here, but not retreat. Every worldview faces mysteries. A purely naturalistic one must explain why suffering exists at all if life is accidental. In Christianity, suffering has context and direction. It is not random cruelty, but part of a story whose ending is restoration. And about infants, the cross means God does not ask of humanity what he has not endured himself. Christianity doesn't glorify pain. It insists love is so vast that even suffering can be gathered into redemption rather than wasted.
You argue that love requires the risk of suffering, but this conflates two different kinds of evil. The risk of a person using their free will to harm another is a moral issue. A child dying from a genetic disease or a village being destroyed by an earthquake is a natural one. We are not asking for a world of programmed robots. We are asking why the stage itself is so hostile. Why is the natural world, the very hardware of creation, filled with processes that inflict such random, agonizing pain? This has nothing to do with human freedom. You say naturalism also has a mystery of suffering. It does not. Suffering in an indifferent universe governed by blind forces is expected. There is no contradiction. The contradiction is exclusive to the claim that an all-powerful, all-loving mind is the deliberate architect of this brutal system. God's suffering on the cross is a powerful story of empathy, but it doesn't answer that fundamental design question.
That's fair. You're distinguishing human evil from natural evil. But let's look closer. Why assume natural evil is pointless? What looks random may be woven into a system far larger than we see. The same tectonic shifts that topple villages also recycle minerals, sustain climates, and shape habitable land. The same biology that produces mutation, and yes, disease, also drives the astonishing diversity and resilience of life. A safe stage might also be a sterile one. Naturalism can say, suffering just is. Christianity says, suffering has meaning. That's the difference. The contradiction you raise only holds if love means painless comfort. Christianity redefines love as something deeper, presence in pain, not insulation from it. And the cross is not just empathy, it's the claim that God will ultimately renew creation itself. The stage is not final, it's being remade.
You conclude by arguing that suffering is a necessary, interwoven part of a complex world, and that Christianity provides meaning and a promise of renewal. But this defense forces a choice. To save God's love, you must sacrifice His power. You suggest God had to accept a brutal world to avoid a sterile one. An omnipotent being, by definition, faces no such compromise. He could have created a world that is both vibrant and compassionate. And while you offer a meaning for suffering, an invented purpose does not excuse the horror, especially to those who are crushed by it. It simply relabels it. In the end, to make the concept of God fit the evidence of our world, all loving has been redefined to be compatible with immense cruelty, and all-powerful has been redefined to accept it. The promise of a future restoration does not solve this profound contradiction in the present. That contradiction remains the problem.
You argue I've sacrificed God's power to save His love. But the Christian claim is the reverse. God's power is so great that He can take even the worst horrors and weave them into a greater story without erasing freedom or beauty. That's not compromise, it's a deeper kind of sovereignty. Yes, He could create a painless world, but would such a world allow for courage, compassion, or sacrificial love? These only exist where suffering is possible. Love without risk becomes comfort, not depth. As for meaning being invented, if suffering is truly meaningless, then despair is the only logical conclusion. Christianity insists it isn't invented but revealed. that history bends toward restoration. The contradiction, you see, is, for Christians, the paradox that an all-powerful, all-loving God enters the very suffering we hate, not to excuse it, but to defeat it.
You conclude with a powerful vision of a God who redeems suffering rather than prevents it. Here, our worldviews are irreconcilable. The claim that true virtues like courage and compassion require a world where children can die of cancer is a terrifying thought. It makes their agony a tool for someone else's growth. An all-powerful, all-loving Creator would not be forced into such a cruel curriculum. You suggest the only alternative to your revealed meaning is despair. It is not. The alternative is to find meaning in our shared humanity, to fight suffering precisely because it is a tangible evil, not a chapter in a divine plan. In the end, your position requires faith in a mysterious, redemptive purpose. My position rests on the observable evidence. This world, with its mix of beauty and brutality, appears exactly as one would expect a world without a divine architect to be. Thank you.
Thank you. You're right. We've reached the fork in the road. For you, the world's pain is evidence of absence. For me, it's evidence of need. If courage and compassion emerge in the shadow of tragedy, that doesn't trivialize the child's suffering. It magnifies the urgency of our response. Christianity never says, be grateful for cancer. It says, stand against it, and know that even where we fail, God is not absent. Shared humanity is indeed powerful, but it has limits. Empires rise and fall, technology advances, yet injustice persists. If suffering is only what we can resist, then despair is always crouching nearby. Christianity offers hope that suffering is not just fought. It will be finally undone. So we close with two visions, one where suffering is expected and one where it is conquered. Which is more human to hope for?
Thank you for that final, eloquent summary of the two perspectives. This has been an excellent and thought-provoking debate. You argued the Christian position with great clarity, depth, and respect for the format. You've perfectly captured the essence of the fork in the road. One worldview that finds its explanation in the observable world and meaning in human action, and another that finds its explanation in a divine narrative, where suffering is ultimately conquered, not just endured.